Hey, good morning, Odell.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. So again, welcome to Sumo Logic Search Mastery certification session. In this session, we'll give you a brief introduction and a review, so to speak, and our objectives. This particular course is all about you, I, us, we getting in there and getting our hands dirty. So we're going to go ahead and log into our training environment again. Again, you'll be exposed to our training environment where we know and manage the environment. We'll create some searching, some parsing, and we'll look at some field extraction rules, some FERs, okay? We'll also get into conditional and filtering operations. We'll do some plotting on the maps. We'll format our results, and we'll look at some moving and rolling averages. We'll identify some trends, outliers, and some comparisons, and then we'll create some alerts. Then finally, you'll have an opportunity to get certified, and you'll have 60 minutes to do the certification. Again, just as any of the classes you've taken with us, most of the classes, we offer you an Uber Eats voucher because we're glad to have you here to take training with us, and two, we want to show you our appreciation. So I'll put in the link here once we get into the exam, where you will be able to fill out the form for your $15 Uber Eats voucher. All right, this slide is sort of a review just to kind of get our minds focused on the topic at hand. I'm going to save some bandwidth here and turn off my video so you can focus on the lecture and the slides. As I mentioned to you earlier, again, my background, I started out in DevOps. And again, my story is, had I had the CIP platform, I wouldn't have to log in and do some greps where I search my logs and things of that sort to find out if there's any issues. If I would have had the CIP, I could have created a dashboard, maybe an operational dashboard that kind of tells me, are my systems up and running? The health of my systems. Are there any mean times that I need to resolve or identify? I could have built a security intelligence dashboard where I could have found out where are users logging in from. Does anyone have root access? Are they logging in from multiple, more than once from multiple locations around the world or region? So again, I could have gleaned that information from a security intelligence dashboard. From a business perspective, of course, I could have found out what pages are my customers frequently using? What are they ordering? Any marketing campaigns, how successful was it? I could have gleaned that information from my business intelligence dashboard. And then finally, from a global perspective, this is comparing my company's data globally, finding out how do I compare to other companies. We, of course, are going to do this searching and parsing with your logs and your metrics. So all of that machine data that's being collected, whether it's an app coming from an app or a cloud system or mobile devices, again, wherever your logs and metrics are coming from, we, of course, are going to allow you to bring that into our Sumo Logic environment. What do we offer? Our analytics. One of our key core values is we're in it with our customers. Again, we talk about a multi-tenancy environment. We take security as priority number one for us. We're very secure. We have some advanced analytics that some of you may have seen taking the fundamentals course. We are scalable, so if you need to add more resources, we can meet your needs. We're elastic, which means we can contract and expand to any of your needs. Some companies may want to incorporate the CIP's Sumo Logic's continuous intelligence platform. They might want to incorporate it so you can use APIs, application programming interfaces. You'll notice over to the right our attestments. Again, we take security as priority number one. These are some of our Attachments here, we're SOC 2 certified, FedRAMP, HIPAA. Again, those are some of our certifications. You'll notice that I'm going sort of quickly and fluidly over this slide because it was the same slide that we had in our fundamentals course for those of you that have taken that course. And then lastly, your people, again, our CIP is going to provide a continuous collaboration across all lines of your business, allow you to facilitate and have speedy decision making from a single source. Okay, so the bottom line here, you can share your findings. Okay. Another recap slide from fundamentals, just to kind of let you know, there's a logical data flow. Again, first as I mentioned yesterday, you want to keep in mind that the highway that we talked about yesterday, or for some of you that have taken a course with me, I often refer to highway, getting your logs and metrics into our Sumo Logic cloud environment. We use something called a collector. A collector is going to encrypt, compress, and send your logs and metrics into the Sumo Logic environment. Your collector also is where you define your sources. If you're interested in learning more about collectors, again, you can come to our administration course, which actually will be held tomorrow. Searching and analyzes in the next step. So once your data is actually, your logs and metrics are in our environment, it will enable you to create some searches and do some analysis using operators and displaying your results in charts. That's where we're going to spend most of our time today. Okay. We'll also build some visualizations and some alerts and some dashboards as well. All right, remember we talked about metadata tags, and we used most often the source category. That's the one in bold. It's freely configurable, which essentially means we can equate it to Labs Apache Axis, Labs Apache Era, or prod or dev Apache Era, and so forth. So again, we can freely configure it. That's the one you'll see that we'll use most often. All right, are there any questions from yesterday? James, if you give me a minute, I'll put that in there once we get towards the, well, okay, John put it in there once we get towards the actual lab. But anyhow, again, ladies and gentlemen, what I like for you all to do is think of a number from 1 to 999. You can use the same number that you used in yesterday's class if you like. It's not mandatory. Thank you for putting your number in the chat. Appreciate that. For those of you that didn't join us yesterday, let me at least walk you through the environment. First, I'm going to go ahead and paste in the credentials. All right, so everyone is now seeing the credentials. If you want to watch me first, for those of you that have never done this, I'll demonstrate what we're going to do, okay? So you, of course, are going to open up a browser. You are logging into Sumo Logic's training environment, our training. We manage that area, okay? So we know about those objects there, okay? So I'm going to demonstrate to you what you're going to do. You're going to open up a browser. You're going to log into our training environment by typing in service.sumologic.com. Once you type that in a browser, it's going to prompt you. I put the credentials, and John as well put the credentials in the chat. So you're just going to type in the word training. Add the plus symbol, the word analyst. Put in your 3-digit number at sumologic.com. The password, of course, is logs with an uppercase L and exclamation mark. So again, just to kind of inform you what's going on, you're going to do the exact same thing, but you're going to put your own 3 numbers right there, and then sign in, of course. Please let us know if you're having any trouble signing in, logging in. I don't want to leave anyone. Go ahead and confirm that you were able to log in successfully by either raising your hand or letting us know in chat. KC, what's your problem by not able? Can you tell us what an error you're getting? Because you might have to use another number. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Lucas. Thank you, Preet. Good to go, Larry. Thank you. Thank you, Regina. Thank you, Joseph. Again, we don't want to leave anyone. Let us know if you're not able to get in, please. John will assist here. Thank you, Jeffrey, James, Kenneth, Michael, Daniel, Benjamin, all of those that raised your hand. Thank you. Again, put it in the credentials one more time for anyone that has any errors or problems. All right, thanks, James. Looks like you're ready. Hoyan, thank you. Oliver, thank you. Thank you, Alex. All right, looks like a lot of you are already logged in. That's awesome. What's the error that you're getting, Casey? Yeah, John put in another number that you can try. You can copy it from chat. Or you can type it in. You use that 985 number, that'll work for sure. Just allowing others to join. Young Kwan, if you could use another number, use 521 or something. Good, Casey. Glad to have you in.
And Con, if you try 603, so Training Plus Analyst 603 at sumologic.com, and the password of, oh shoot, I put it in the wrong, logs, L-O-G-S, sorry, my fault, logs, L-O-G-S with a capital L, 2022, exclamation mark, you should be able to get in. Most people forget the exclamation mark, or they forget to replace the hashtags with that 3-digit number, or they forget at sumologic.com. Those are the common mistakes.
Thank you, sir. All right, so again, if you have problems, go ahead and put them in the chat. We're going to continue on here. All right, I'll give you just a quick overview, ladies and gentlemen. Again, if you logged in and you have a bunch of tabs open, if you logged in the environment and you have a bunch of tabs up top, you can close those tabs by going to any one of them, clicking on the 3 dots and choosing close all tabs. All right, I'm going to demonstrate where you can get the actual course materials. If you remember yesterday, or for those of you that have taken the fundamentals course, we were in the home tab under the learn link and we saw fundamentals and we saw administration, but there's no search mastery for the labs. So how do you get to the labs? If you open up a browser, you can type in help.sumologic.com. Again, I'm demonstrating where you can get the lab guide from. All right, so once you type in help.sumologic.com, you can click on the first leftmost box that reads Start Here. Then you can click on the Quick Start and Labs, Quick Start and Labs and Tutorials. Click on that link. And again, you should see the search mastery. And I'll put this link in the chat for those of you that may not be able to find it. There it is. These are the lab steps that we're going to follow. Also, as I remind you, if you're in a Google Chrome environment, you can pin your tabs by right-clicking on the tab and pinning it. The advantage is you'll be able to toggle between your labs and the CIP. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and get started here, ladies and gentlemen. I am going to do a couple things with my environment. I'm going to hide my actual navigation panel because we're going to do a lot of log searching, log building. So I want you to see everything that I have. Change my size a little bit as well. Okay. All right, let's get in here. So the introduction, you don't really have to worry about the introduction. It's basically going to allow you to log into the training environment, okay, and just tell you about the training environment. So no worries there, okay? Let's go ahead and click on Lab 1, Search Basics, Metadata, and Keywords. This course, ladies and gentlemen, is to help you with ideas of how to use operators in some advanced queries, okay? Some advanced searching. We start out sort of slow and we build momentum, so be aware of that as well. So in this lab, again, lab number 1, Search Basics, we will learn the use of metadata and keywords to narrow the scope and improve performance. All right, so that very first query there under number 1, I'm just going to right-click on it and copy it. Go back to the CIP, click on the New button. A new log search is what we're about to do. Remember, as a default, when you create a new log search, it's automatically going to look at the last 15 minutes. We can paste in our expression. Again, basically, we're bringing back all of the messages for the last 15 minutes for our access. All right, let's go ahead and run that. Just to remind you what you're receiving, you see a histogram minute by minute. You can hide that if you need to, show it and hide it at your leisure. Below the histogram, you'll see the status, the elapsed time, and the results. Your session ID is there if you need it as well. Over to the left, you'll see a messages tab, and in your field browser, you'll see the 2 fields that are being displayed. We have 7,403 results. Again, your number may not be exactly like mine. That's not the goal of the course here. I am looking at 1 of 297. Okay. All right, now we're just going to build on this. Now remember, ladies and gentlemen, you're only seeing 25 per page. If you ever needed to change that number, you can go to your gear symbol over to the right, click on your display message preferences, and you can change that number. All right, let's go ahead and build on this expression. So as you recalled or you learned in the fundamentals course, the and is optional. It's implied. I don't necessarily have to type the and, but let's go ahead and do this together. We want to type in and 404. So what this is going to do for us, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to bring back all of our access messages that have the key word, or in this instance, the key number 404 in them. And just to make sure we're doing this right, yep, that's correct. All right, let's go ahead and run this. For the last 15 minutes, we'll run it. Now, you'll notice when we run this item, we now see 404 messages, okay? We can go through and see each one of those messages now has 404 highlighted and displayed. We used a keyword. Again, I can get the same results by removing the and because it is implied. Okay, so I still get those messages, and 404 is highlighted. Okay. Now let's replace the and 404. So if you have the and there and the 404, let's replace that. Here we want to search for any access message that has the word error or begins with the word check. So let's go ahead and replace the and 404 with and let's open paren and type in the word error. And we'll type the operator or. And notice what we're doing here. We're saying anything that begins with the word check. So your query should look exactly like mine. Notice, ladies and gentlemen, as we did in other classes, I often flip back to the lab and come back over. But again, we can just type this. It's much easier than going back and forth. Okay. So again, this message says, hey, Odell, yours might not say, hey, Odell, but it says, hey, Odell, bring back the access messages, log messages that have either error or they begin with the word check. Okay, that asterisk, of course, is a wildcard. If you're unfamiliar with that, we actually have similarities to SQL. So that wildcard means anything that begins with check. Let's run that for the last 15 minutes. And again, we can see we have 100 results. I'm looking at page 1 of 4, and these messages either have check, something beginning with check, or error. Okay. All right, hopefully you are up to speed with me and there's no issues. All right, let's continue on. And just to kind of flip back just so you can know where I am in the steps. So far we've done 1, 2, and 3, okay? Now we're about to look at our Labs Apache era for the last 45 minutes. So instead of copying and pasting, I'm just gonna highlight the word access and error or check. So I'm highlighting everything after the slash, the Apache slash. And then I'm just gonna type in error. So now we're going to another source, okay? And we're gonna do this for the last 45 minutes. So notice when I click on my time, I don't see 45 minutes. If you've never been in the training environment with that user ID, you may not see a recent, okay? If you do see a recent, you can go ahead and click on that 45. If you don't see it, this is how you type in your own number. So you highlight whatever's there. You start out with a minus symbol, type in your numeric value. And since we're doing the last 45 minutes, we'll use M for minutes, H for hours, and D for days. So just to recap, we're looking at our error logs from Apache for the last 45 minutes. We see that it has completed, it's done, the elapsed time. We have over 5,000 results. We're looking at page 1 of 228. We can see our messages, and notice, you may or may not know this, but you'll notice that my error messages look different than my access messages. I just want you to keep that in mind as we start going through this class, all right? Again, my error messages are formatted differently than my access messages. And you'll see that as we go further, okay? All right, next, we want to look at and bring back messages from our Apache era or from our Apache access. So we're just going to append to the message that we have already there, the query we already have. So we're just going to add a space and type in or, and then we'll type in underscore source category. And then we want to make it equal, okay? And then we'll just type in what we had before. This time it's going to be labs / Apache / access. Odell, does case matter? Because I notice that you have labs in uppercase for the errors and you have it. Remember, you learned about this yesterday. Case insensitive. Now, there's some benefits of what we're doing here. We're telling the tool, hey, bring back error messages or access messages. So that's essentially bringing back everything, right? We see we have 27,000 results. We're looking at page 1 of 1,120. There's 25 per page, okay? Now, we talked about this, and this question may have came up in the fundamentals exam as well, but we talked about the field browser at a high level, okay? This is your field browser over here, okay? Now, one of the things that we can do, we can see that we have source category as a metadata tag, but we also see that it has been extracted as well. So if I click on the name, not the block, not the box, not the empty box, if I could just click on the name, it'll give me a percentage of all of those source categories. In this instance, we only have 2. So 79% of these items, these messages, are coming from access. 20% is coming from error. Odell, how did you do that again? Again, I just clicked on the name, okay? The reason I'm emphasizing the name as opposed to the actual empty box there is because if you click on the box, it will add it to the query, and that's not what we want right now, okay? Just be aware that you have those features within the field browser. And we're going to build on what we learned in the field browser as well. All right, very good. You guys are doing wonderful so far. All right, next, again, just to kind of keep you track of where we are, we had just completed step 5. Now we're going to search across anything under Labs Apache, okay? So going back to the CIP, I'm just highlighting everything after error. So error and everything after it, highlighting that and replacing it with an asterisk. Remember, an asterisk is a wildcard. So it's saying, hey, Odell, bring back all of the messages from Labs, Apache, and anything underneath that. Well, you and I know that we have error and access underneath it. So when we run this, and that was one of your questions in the fundamentals as well, can you add wildcards to your source category searches? And yes, you can, as you can see there. So again, we have over 1,000 messages. I have over, we have one of 1,125 pages. We have 28,000 messages. Again, we can see these messages are coming from different places. If I scroll through here, I will eventually see some error messages as well. But to make it easier for myself, I can just go over to the field browser and click on my source category, and it gives me a breakdown of the percentages from those source categories, okay? Again, we're not concerned about the actual numbers being identical. We're more understanding the actual method. All right. So again, we're taking you sort of slow. Some of this stuff you know already. Again, we're going to build on that shortly. Lastly, we're going to run a live tail search for our Labs Apache access for messages containing 404s. Okay, so you can actually highlight what you, if you want, you can highlight the actual query that's there, or you can type this. But again, Let's click on the new button this time, the new. So far, all we've been doing is log searching. We're going to go down to a live tail. So go ahead and click on a live tail. Odell, what's a live tail again? I forgot. Well, great question. A live tail shows you your search as your messages are being ingested into Sumo Logic, you'll get that visualization, okay? Again, there's a governor that we set here at Sumo Logic that you can only run 10 concurrent live tails at one time, okay? So let's go ahead and either paste or type in underscore source category equals labs / Apache / access, okay? And then go ahead and add the 404. Organization, good question, James. Is there a limit 10 per user or 10 per organization? Okay. And Jeff asked the same question. So you guys, great minds think alike. So hopefully I answered you. All right, now, once we click on the actual run button over to the right, notice what I get. 10 live tail sessions are already running, okay? So again, you may or may not see this, but all of us are actually running simultaneously. So that's why you're getting that limitation. Now, while we're here, I wanted to point out something as well for you. If you are running the act, you're successful with running this, you'll notice that the 404 messages are not highlighted. So an actual approach to get those highlighted is to go right over to the right here. If you're following me on the screen, you'll see a highlight. I can type in 404 and rerun it, hit enter, and those messages that have 404s will now be highlighted. Okay. All right. All right, so no worries if you weren't able to run that. Typically, a live tail is ran by an administrator. Okay, so no worries if you weren't able to run it. You try it a little later. Here's mine running now. I wanted to click on it so you can actually eventually see what it's going to look like. And you can see that my 404 messages, as they're being ingested, are being highlighted. Okay, that's because I clicked on the highlight icon. All right. All right, let's look at some questions to wrap up the chapter. Again, it's a good idea to take these questions and answer these questions to kind of get your minds around the actual topic at hand. All right, first question here. Keywords are case insensitive. Excuse me, sorry, that says case sensitive. Keywords are case sensitive. True or false? Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Jeffrey. So everyone says false, which is correct. You heard Odell emphasize case insensitive all the time. So that is false, okay? Question number 2. The and is implicit and the or is explicit. Thank you, Pruba. Thank you, Oliver. Yep, you guys are all correct. True. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you, Preet. Thank you, Rodrigo. All right, lastly, number 3, keywords and metadata can use wildcards for live tail. Yeah, you can, ladies and gentlemen. Even though I didn't show you that, you can. It's true. And here, real quickly, I can go right here, change this to a wildcard, and run it again. And you see. Okay, so you guys are all correct. Good job. Thank you. All right, let's continue on. You guys are doing awesome. Let's go to Lab 2 by clicking the Lab 2 link in the bottom right corner of Lab 1. Simple parsing, grouping, and filtering is where we are. So what we're going to do here is learn about some basic operators to parse and group our results, okay? We'll get deeper in upcoming labs as well. All right, so this first example here, we want to search our Apache logs, access and error logs for the last 15 minutes and count by the source. All right, so let's highlight that entire query under number 1 and copy it. Let's go back to the CIP. Any tabs that you have open now, ladies and gentlemen, you don't need those tabs. You can actually close them. Okay. All right, so now let's go ahead and create a new log search. Okay. And let's paste our expression. Now recall yesterday, ladies and gentlemen, what we did, for those of you that have taken the fundamentals courses, I apologize for keep referring to those that have taken the class. But anyhow, what we did was we added a aggregate, count, min, max, average. Those are aggregates. We're piping because we want to continue our expression. We could have had this all on one line. It would have worked as well. But just for readability and easier to visually see, again, we put things on a separate line when we're piping our expressions, okay? So we're going to run this query for anything under labs Apache. And we're going to count by source, okay? So I want to run this for the last 15 minutes. And notice, ladies and gentlemen, you have your histogram, you have your status, elapsed time, and your results, over 9,000 results. I have 2 tabs. I have the messages tabs, okay? So again, that gives me my items and all of my results. I'm seeing 1 of 368. And since we have a count, I have an aggregates tab. But notice it's counting something called source. Okay, notice in my field browser, that field is one of the fields that has been extracted. And we'll talk more about this coming up. But I was able to count by this item, even though it's not listed in my query, but it's listed in my field browser. Okay, so again, we get the aggregates tab, and I can see that I have 7,000 messages from Access and 1,000 or so from Apache. Remember also, we could have went to our source category, clicked on the name, and saw those same numbers. Okay. All right. Now, we're querying, that's a word. We're writing a query to query across 2 sources. One of the things that I mentioned to you earlier is that these messages from those 2 sources are formatted differently. So right now I can see my lab Apache messages and how they're formatted. And if I scroll through here, I'll eventually see my access messages and how they're formatted. So they're formatted differently. We taught you in the fundamentals course a parsing operator. We taught you parse anchor. One of the things that we mentioned when you learn about the parse anchor is that your messages have to be all formatted the same, okay? Well, we can see right away that these messages are not formatted the same. They're coming from 2 different sources. So that leads us to step number 2 in lab 2. We're going to use a parse regex. So again, let's highlight the last 2 lines in lab 2 number 2. Let's highlight those last 2 lines and right click and copy. And let's go back to the CIP and replace the last line by highlighting it and pasting. Okay. And then remember yesterday, or remember in prior courses, we taught you how to comment out. So I'm commenting, you don't need to do this. I'm showing you because I want to break down this message. I'm commenting out both lines, okay? And I'm going to run this query just to kind of give you an idea of what's going on. So the first thing we're doing is we're querying across anything under Apache, okay? The next item in our query, the next line in our query says, parse regex. Create a new field called IP address. Identify 1 to 3 digits and a period. 1 to 3 digits and a period. 1 to 3 digits and a period, and 1 to 3 digits. Now, in your minds, that immediately says, oh, that sounds like an IP address. So what the tool is going to do is going to go through each message and look for the IP address. So here it is for my lab Apache access, okay? And if I go down and look for in my other source, which I don't see, it'll be a different style, okay? And I want to kind of, so here, perfect. Just so you can visually see. So here is my error. Notice in the first place is not my IP address. This one actually doesn't have an IP address, okay? So here's one that has one, but it's not in the first place like access. So that's why we're using a parse regex. It doesn't care how your messages are formatted. It's going to look for that string, okay? So we run that message. Again, a parse regex is similar to a parse. It's going to parse out the object it's looking for, okay? So again, in my errors, I see it parsed out the actual IP address right here. And if I go and find some of my access, you'll see it took the first item here. And that was because we use a parse regex. Lastly, we're going to count by our IP addresses. Again, that's using an operator. You know, anytime you use an aggregate operator, it's going to automatically give you an aggregates tab. It's counting the IP address, which is the field that we created in the parse regex. Let's run that. And we can see the messages from each, the total amount of messages from each IP. Okay, and this might be practical, something you need. Here's an IP address that's bringing over 448 messages. Do we have an office there or what? Okay. Anyhow, let's continue on. We're now on number 3 here in lab 2. We want to filter out those with a counter that's greater than 500 and display our results in a pie chart. So all we're going to do is highlight the where under number 3, just highlight and copy that. Okay. And let's go back to the CIP. Now, we could visually go through here and scan and look for anything greater than 500. But we don't want to have to visually do that. Time may be of essence to us. So what we want to do in our query is we want to place our cursor on the line where it reads count by IP address. Place it at the end of that line. And if you want to add a new blank line, on my Mac, I use the Shift Return. In your environment, if you're not using the Mac, you're going to use the Alt Enter and then paste your actual item. Rebecca, un momento, por favor. Rebecca says, what if there's more than multiple IP addresses in the message? You're ahead of the game. We're going to get just to that shortly, but that's a great question. We'll be there shortly. No worries. All right, so let's go ahead and run this. We're looking for counts that are greater than 500. And we run it, and we can see the IP addresses where we had over 500 messages, okay? Now, again, as mentioned yesterday, hopefully you remembered from your fundamentals course whenever you've taken it, again, in order to display an item in our display choices here, you have to have an aggregates. We have an aggregate. So now we're able to see our actual results in a bar chart, a column chart, or we can go ahead and click on a pie chart, which was what the results want us to do. Okay. Awesome. Next, number 4 here. In a new query, we're going to identify the top 10 source IP addresses by bandwidth usage. This will require parsing the byte sizes as well as the source IPs. So let's highlight everything under number 4 and copy that. And let's go back to our CIP and create a new log search. And let's paste it in our query area. Now I'm going to demonstrate another feature that you may not be aware of. This feature allows you to actually comment out more than one line, okay? If you take a look and watch me first, I am placing my cursor to the left of the parse regex. I'm clicking down on the options on my Mac. You would click on, if you're not on the Mac, you're gonna click on the Alt key. And you'll notice when I click on options, my mouse changes and I can drag a solid line to the left and let go. That blinking cursor says it's going to apply anything you type to all lines, okay? So I just threw out something there real quickly. But what we want to do here is comment out. So I'm commenting out all lines of code. Odell, how did you do that again? All right, I'll do it again for you. So again, I'm placing my cursor and clicking to the left of the pipe symbol. On my Mac, I'm clicking on the options. My mouse changes. If you're not on a Mac, you're going to use the Alt key. You hold the options key down in your left mouse and you drag down and you'll see a solid line blinking there. Then you can add the slashes. All right, now let's go ahead and see what we're doing here. We're going to bring back all of our access log messages. So we can run that for the last 15 minutes. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do here is we're going to parse out again. Remember, we're using the parse regex. Okay, Odell, could we just use the parse because all of the messages in the accesses are formatted? Yeah, you could have. But again, this is just in case you forget something or the messages have come in differently. This kind of covers that base. We're using the parse regex, creating a new field called IP address, looking for 1 to 3 digits 4 times, okay, which is our IP address. So if we run that, we'll see that it will filter out our IP addresses. Okay. Now we're using a parse anchor, okay? And this parse anchor is saying, if you look at my message here, it's saying, hey, find out where you see 200. So it's going to look for 200. So I found one on this row right here. It says, find out where you see 200. That's what this message is saying. It says the next value, the next field after that, we're going to call that size. So this first number is, of course, if you're in fundamentals with me, this is your status code. So it's looking for the status code of 200. It says once you find that, the next field we're going to parse out is going to be called size. So again, we'll run the query. We now should have 2 columns that have been added. Not only do you have the IP address, but now you have a size. And again, it's looking for wherever 200 is. So all these messages have the status code of 200. So you're filtering. All right, next in our code here, we're going to use the sum operator. So we're going to sum our size. And we're going to give it a new field name called total bytes. And we're summing our size by each IP address. Okay. So we run that. And again, we get the total bytes by IP address. So maybe you had set some governors on how much size or how much memory some of your groups can use. Maybe this might be a report that you can utilize, okay? Then lastly here, we're gonna go ahead and we want the top 10 IP addresses. Now the top operator is going to sort this as well in descending order, but we want the top 10 IP addresses by total bytes, and we'll run that. Okay, and here we'll see in a descending order by total bytes based on the top 10, because the top operator sorts descending automatically. If we wanted this in ascending, we'd just type in the word ASC, okay? And we can see it change. Or we could have clicked the column header as well. That would have changed it also. All right, let's see, we got a few questions here. What is the built-in size in the hidden field? So if we go back to the messages, and that size, this size here, you're talking about this one here. Well, let's click on it. Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's a field, the field that's been extracted that I'll talk about shortly. Again, when you ingest, you can have some fields come out automatically. So again, I'll talk about that shortly, but good question. All right, so this query has ran. It actually created an aggregates tab because of the sum. Remember, any type of aggregate operator is going to create an aggregates tab. We got the top 10 IP addresses by total bytes in descending order, okay? All right, let's continue on here, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go back to our labs. And we've completed lab 4. Let's go on to our lab 3. So we completed lab 2. Let's go on to lab 3, parsing options. Lab 3 is where we are. Yeah, that's correct, Rodrigo. That's correct. The by is implied. So yeah. So by default, ladies and gentlemen, dynamic parsing mode, that option is turned on. So there's an option in our environment that's turned on automatically. It's enabled. That's your dynamic parsing mode. What are the benefits of it? Dynamic parsing allows automatic field extraction. You've heard or you've seen FERs, field extraction rules. Well, we're talking about our tool is going to automatically extract fields for JSON messages. What does this allow you to do? It allows those fields to be viewed in the field browser without having to manually parse them out, okay? Dynamic parsing extracts JSON fields when you run a query at search time, okay? So let's take a look here. Under number 1, let's highlight the actual code, okay, and copy that. And let's go ahead and create a new log search. And let's paste in our copied item. Again, I'm going to comment out my count by so you can just see the actual values. So let's understand what's going on. First of all, we're going against our CloudTrail data. We're bringing back our CloudTrail messages. We have over 3,000 messages. We're looking at page 1 of 121. We'll see that these fields is a lot longer in our field browser. Now let's take a look at the message, for example. Notice here in my message, I have user identity, and then I have type and some more fields, okay? Now, if I go up into my messages, there's a gear symbol up to the top of the blue run button. You'll see that auto parsing mode is turned on automatically. So what is that doing, Odell? So any JSON logs like CloudTrail, the tool is going to automatically do parsing for you. Key value, key and value. Key and value will be, the key will be parsed out. So if I take a look here, I can see user identity. If I go down, I can see user identity has other fields, same as that I'm seeing over here. Now, let me digress for a moment here, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to turn this off. You don't need to do this. I want you to watch. I'm going to turn off the auto parse mode. I'm going to rerun my query. What I want you to understand and take note of is that with that governor turned off, I don't get those key value, those actual fields parsed out. I don't get that. So what would I have to do? I would have to build a parse statement, either parse anchor or parse regex, and get those fields out. But since our tool does it automatically, it makes life so much easier. So again, I'm going to turn that auto parsing mode back on and rerun my report, my query. Okay, and when I run my query, it by default parses out those fields. Okay, if I take a look here, I have multiple regions, AWS West, US West, and so forth. SA East, I want to count up my regions. Okay, my messages by regions. I'm using a count operator, so you know you're going to have an aggregate tab. All right, so again, our original messages are still there. Everything has been automatically taken out for us in our field browser. We have an aggregates tab because we're using the count by, and we can see our actual messages from CloudTrail from each region. So you can, US West has quite a few messages coming from there, okay? All right. Thank you, Lucas. Lucas had a comment in there for everyone about using autoparse. Thanks. All right, let's continue on. Next, number 2 here, the no drop option for the parse operator allows users to include messages in the results that don't meet the pattern criteria. We're going to look at our Apache error logs for the last 15 minutes and take a look at the messages that don't have an IP. So go ahead and highlight the actual query under number 2, and let's create a new log search. And let's paste that in there. And we're running that. Looks like for 15 minutes. Yep. Okay. So let's run that for 15 minutes so we can visually see what's going on here. So these are error messages. And what we're going to notice here is some of them do not have an IP. Some of them do not have an IP. So here's one, it has an IP. But there's others that don't have IPs. Okay. So let's continue on with this query. We're going to add the, under number 3, let's go ahead and add the parse statement. So I'm going to copy the, under number 3, go back to my CIP. I want to add a new line here, ladies and gentlemen. So I'll go ahead and put my cursor at the end of the source category and hit the Shift return or Alt enter and paste. Now, what this is going to do, the parse anchor is going to look for bracket client, okay? Once it finds bracket client, whatever object is after that, we're going to call that object client IP. So in this instance, you'll see there's no IP address, okay? If I go down here, I'll see client and I'll see IP. So the tool is going to filter out. If it doesn't meet the criteria, you're not going to see it. So here's a perfect case. This very first one doesn't have an IP address. So we're not going to see that in our results because it doesn't meet our criteria. All right, let's run that for 15 minutes and you'll see what I mean. All right, so we have over 886 results. That's less than what we had initially. If you recall, real quickly, I'll do this. You don't have to do this. I want to just kind of demonstrate. When I ran it without the parse statement, I have over 1,763 results. When I run it with the parse statement, again, it filters out. So now my results are much less than the 1,000. I have over 855, 854, okay? Notice here, it looked and found client, grab the IP, client IP. Now there's some instances where the IP looks a little different, right here, this one, but it did follow the actual pattern that we're looking for. Now, knowing that the parse filters out, there may be instances where you don't want to exclude anything. So going back to our lab steps here, we're going to go ahead and add the no drop statement, and let's go ahead and add the parse. So I'm going to highlight all of this. I'll highlight the no drop and the parse mod log, and I'll put that over in the chat. Okay. So what you can do, ladies and gentlemen, here, you can just type no drop at the end of the statement. Just type no drop. Okay. And let's run it and see what happens. Notice before we had 854 results. Now we're back to that original number. Okay, and see what it does. It says, hey, I'm looking for the client IP. If I don't find it, I'm still going to bring back the results. So again, that no drop says, even if it doesn't meet the criteria, bring it back anyway, okay? And this might be a good practice if you missed something, however, okay? Now I'm gonna add a new line, and I know I told you to copy something. Let's see how it worked. And mine didn't copy correctly anyway, so that's awesome. Sorry about that. I'm just going to highlight the last line here under number 4 and copy that, okay? Again, you're on number 4 under lab 3. We're just adding one more phrase, one more statement to our query. All right, you add a new line and you're going to paste in parse mod underscore log underscore SQL colon as message. So let's look at what it's going to do. It's saying, hey, use the parse anchor, find mod SQL colon. The next field after that is going to be called message. Okay. Again, find mod underscore log underscore SQL colon. The next object after that is going to be called message. So when we run this, now we have another column. Not only do we have a client IP, but we have a messages column, okay? Again, you can conclude when there isn't an IP, we should see a message, okay? All right, let's continue on here. We're on number 5. We want to filter those parsed by one or the other statement by using an is empty, is blank, or is null. Now, I like bringing up that is empty, so I'm just going to digress for a moment and type in my help Sumo logic. Again, I bring this up just so you'll be aware there's some differences here between the is empty, is null, etc. So I just queried and looked for the is empty. And you can see here is empty is an operator checks for a string, contains no characters, is only white space, and is blank checks for a string as well, but no characters, only white space, and is nulls. Okay, so again, I'll leave that there for your readings, and I'll add it for you as well. You can always search these items. All right, let's continue on here. Go back to our lab guide. We are on number 5. So let's highlight all of the code under number 5. All we're doing is adding, actually we're adding one more line of code, actually. We're just adding that last line. So if you can do one better. Just highlight the last line in number 5. It's easier that way. We're using a where clause is blank client IP. So let's go back to the CIP. We'll place our cursor at the end of the last parse statement. We'll add a new row, and then we'll paste in. So basically this where is saying my client IP is blank. So where my client IP is blank. And let's run that. So as I talked and mentioned before, you can conclude where there wasn't an IP, there's a message. So we can see there's a message where there isn't an IP. We just brought back all of our IPs that are blank, okay? All right. Just to kind of let you know, John put in a nice tip in the actual chat to one of our students. He mentioned that when you do a parse statement, it not only extracts the field, but it filters. So only the message that meets that criteria, that statement, the no drop will not have it act as a filter. Okay, that's all it's doing. Good job. Thanks, John. All right. Let's go back to the CIP. We'll take a break right after this demo, ladies and gentlemen, this lab, so hang in there with me. We're on number 6 here. The parse field option allows you to do further parsing on an already extracted field. Now, in case this comes up on an exam somewhere, again, the parse field option allows you to do further parsing on an already extracted field, okay? So we want to identify the top 5 committers in our GitHub. We're going to search the committers in the last 30 days and parse their email addresses. So under number 6, let's go ahead and highlight and copy that and create a new log search. You can close any of the ones that you have open. It's clogging up your environment. New log search and paste. And of course, we want to do this for the last 60 minutes. Oh, sorry, it's for the last 30 days, Odell. Last 30 days. Thank you. You guys are awesome. Last 30 days. Now let's take a look at the code so we can kind of see what's going on. We are actually bringing back our messages from GitHub. We're adding a keyword committer. So again, I want to comment out so you can see what it's going to do, bring back the results. All right, so that's taking a little bit of time here because again, we're going for the last 30 days and we'll essentially get results here. Okay, still processing. All right, now, the next thing we're gonna do here with this GitHub logs is we're going to parse out email. So we're gonna look for our email and parse that out, okay? And this, I don't have enough room for it to display all the fields, but again, we're gonna essentially see it parse out our email addresses, okay? It's gonna look for the expression email slash and then colon, and then the next field after that, it's going to call it email. All right, let's run that for the last 30 days. Notice you now have a new column called email in your field browser. That column is also listed and checked as a display field. Again, just by using the parse statement. Okay. All right, let's take a look here. We're on number 7 now. Now, we're going to use the parse field option to further parse the email address into user and domain. Then we'll count by our user and identify the top 5 committers. Okay, so we can highlight, let's see here, those last 3 lines of code under number 7, the last 3 lines of code under number 7. And let's go back to our CIP. And if you place your cursor at the end of the parse statement, add a new blank line and then paste. All right, so let me just comment out these last 2 lines. We've already ran the GitHub and we're looking for committers. It parsed out email already. We can see that field being parsed out right here. We're piping and continuing to use the parse, but this time we're using the field operator and we're equating it to email. So we're saying, hey, parse the field that we named email. And whatever's before the @ symbol, we're going to call that user. Whatever's after the @ symbol, we're going to call that domain. So it's going to further parse this field. Okay, so that's what that second line parsing is doing. All right, so notice in my field browser, I now have 2 additional fields. I have domain and user that is being displayed. I see the domain and the user, okay? So again, we can further parse an already parsed field by using the field operator, okay? Next, we're gonna use a count. So we're gonna count up the users. So that should give us an aggregate because we're using an aggregate operator. So what we're going to see here is the user and the amount of messages from the GitHub, committer messages that we're getting from the GitHub based on each user. And lastly, we want the top 5 users by count. So we should see maybe this one here, this 4,000 one, we should see that one maybe, okay? Let's run that again. Be aware that the top operator is going to sort in descending order automatically. So these are the top 5 users that have committers coming from our GitHub. Okay. All right. Now, someone asked earlier, hey, Odell, what about if I have messages that have more than one IP address? Here's your answer right here. The parse multi. That option allows you to extract multiple occurrences of the same pattern within one message. Now, by default, parse only extracts the first occurrence. Okay, so we're going to go against our snort logs. Again, copy what's under number 8 for me. And let's go ahead and create a new log search. And let's paste in our query. And I'm just going to comment out so you can see the snort messages. And I'm just going to add 60 minutes, pardon me. All right, so these are my snort log messages, okay? I can see one IP address, and then I can see another one, okay? I am going to use the parse regex. we are going to use the parse regex, where it's going to create a new field called IP address. It's looking for 1 to 3 digits 4 times, which is the IP address. So it's going to parse that out, filter that out. Okay. Right now I'm seeing over 6,186 results. When we run that query with the parse regex, we're going to see that it filters out. We're not seeing all 6,000 messages anymore. Oh, yeah, we are, because each one of them they met the criteria. So that makes sense. Okay. So each one of the actual messages meets the criteria. But notice, I see the time it happened and I see the IP address. So the first IP address has been taken out. And when I go to the next message, again, I see the IP, but this is a different message altogether. So it's filtering out that first occurrence. Okay. Now, all we have to do is at the end of the parse statement, type in multi. Just type in multi after the quotes and add a space. You don't want it right up against it, and run it again. And now you notice, if you take a look at the message, we see the first IP address, which is right here. Okay. Now here's the second IP address. If I look at the next line, it's now taking out the second IP address, and the third and the fourth IP address and the fifth, etc. if you add more. So here's your answer on how you're going to filter out multiple IP addresses. All right, very good, very good. All right. And number 10 here, field extraction rules. I'm just going to demonstrate this really. You can copy that query if you want. Copy under number 10, field extraction rules. And let's go back to the CIP and click on the new log search and paste. Now I'm going to digress to kind of demonstrate to you. You don't necessarily have to do this, ladies and gentlemen. So we talk about FERs. You hear that a lot, or you see that word. It stands for field extraction rules. Okay. So what I'm about to do is I'm going to expand my navigation panel, and I'm going to go down into my main menu. Odell is talking about these field extraction rules. I want to know where they are. How do I create them, and so forth. So if I go to manage data and go to my logs link under manage data, I have several tabs here. I want to go to the field extraction rules tab. And I'm just going to open up one of these items here. It's taking away my demo. It would do that to me anyhow. Just open up one of these. Now, here's the purpose, and here's the reason. Here's the thing that you get from here. Okay. To create a field extraction rule, you're going to designate when it happens. Well, it's going to happen at ingestion time. You're going to designate, well, what is it going to reference? Well, it's going to reference all of my CloudTrail data. So notice the source category is equal to labs at the AWS CloudTrail. So during ingestion of this source, we're going to parse. Notice all these parsing statements. These are the fields that are going to be parsed out and displayed in your field browser. So going back to our CIP, just for a second, I'm toggling. And I go back to my search. I'm going to comment out the count by and run my lab Apache. Okay. And let's bump up the time a little bit and run that again. All righty. Once I get some results here. Right, let me try that in a new query. I don't know what's going on there.
Just go back longer. 7 days.
Let's try longer. Let's try that.
I suggest you go shorter. There should be some 404s within 15 minutes.
All right, let's try 15 minutes. Let's try 15 minutes.
Okay. Do me a favor. Go into messages and let's see what fields you have. Display fields.
Nothing's
That's why you don't
there.
have display fields. Comment out. Do me a favor. Comment out
I did
the
come
and
on.
status code 404. I think I know what happened. You pointed out your no, don't get rid of comment out the and as well. It's going to puke on the end.
Sorry about that. Too
that's
quick. Too quick. Too quick.
It's I think your field extraction was missing.
It is.
That's why
I don't see it.
It's going to work.
Yeah, I don't see it. I don't know how it got moved or there it is. All right, perfect.
Okay. Look for your status code down there at the bottom. And I don't see it.
Yep, it's not here. So that field extraction rule has been moved or long gone. Yeah, I didn't see it either there.
I will add it back in, but it will take a few minutes for it to take effect.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to take a break after this anyhow. But again, ladies and gentlemen, just to kind of let you know what's going on. During ingestion of your messages, it's similar to JSON. Remember, we saw this here, auto parsing. You can set up a field extraction rule for those non-JSON files where it extracts the fields for you during ingestion. So that's why we're able to see these fields, because they're available. They were made available during ingestion time. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and wrap this chapter up. Let's answer a few questions and then we will take a break. Okay. True or false? CSV, JSON, split, key value are all parsing operators. Awesome, Matt. Awesome. True. That's true. Now, if you ever needed to know, just in case you don't know that answer, again, help.sumo logic. And then if I look at the parsing operators, again, just in case you take an exam and you don't know all the answers, this might be approach. Click on parse operators, and I see JSON, key value, CSV, delimited, and so forth. So here are all of those objects. All right. Number 2, once a field has been parsed, it cannot be parsed any further. True or false? All right, you guys were ready for that one. Okay, good job. Number 3, fields parsed by field extraction rules are available in the field browser. True, that was the purpose of it. That's what John and I were just trying to fix a moment ago. Again, the advantage of that field extraction rule is to keep you from having to parse out. It's going to parse during ingestion. Okay. All right, and that's something your administrator will create for you. All right, let's go ahead and take a break. Let's take a 5-minute break here, ladies and gentlemen. I'll go ahead and put up the timer. And I'll see you in 5. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully you got a chance to breathe, stretch, exhale, get away from the laptop computer for a moment. We had just completed lab number 3. We just answered the questions. We talked about field extraction rules. Let's now move on to lab number 4. So let's click on our conditional operators for lab number 4. Now, that conditional operators allow us to do if then else operations. We're going to write a query that scans through our Apache access logs for the last 60 minutes and returns the number of successful requests where the status code is 200 versus the number of error requests where the status code is 404s. So under number 1, let's highlight and copy that entire expression. Let's go back to the CIP. I'm going to close any tabs that I have open already. And let's create a new log search. And let's paste in our expression here. And we're going to change our time to 60 minutes. I am going to comment out so we can walk through the code. All right, so we are going to bring back all messages from our access logs. So bring that back, run that. Okay, now if we look at the message, the next step in our code is to parse out the status code. So it's going to look for HTTP/1.1, and then the next field after that is going to be called status code. Next field after that, status code, and so forth. So it's going to filter out our status codes. So I'm running that. So you're going to see there's different types of status codes. There's 200s, 400s, 300s, 500s, etc. You see all types of status codes. So the tool has filtered out and found it. Okay. Now we're going to use a conditional statement. If our status code equals 200, we're going to classify it as being a 1, which is true. Else it'll be a 0, which is false. So if it meets our criteria, it's going to be true, else false. 1s and 0. We're going to create a new field called successes. Let's run that. So we can look at our new field being created called successes, and we can see our condition has a 0 if it doesn't meet our criteria. So the first 3 items have 0s. When I see a 200, I see a 1 in the success column. Okay, so that condition is working. All right. We now want to take a look at our 404s. Okay. Now, one of the things I could have did immediately was go to my field browser, click on status codes, and I can see the percentage breakdown. Okay. Again, all I did was click on the status codes and saw the percentage breakdown. Okay. The next part of our code says, hey, if the status code equals 404s, we want that to have a 1 being true or a 0 being false, and we're going to call that client error. So we're going to have a new column created, and it's going to have 1s or 0s in it as well, based on it meeting our criteria. So in our first line of code for me, I see that the status code is 200. So 0, which is meaning that it's not a 400. And then in the success column, I have a true. So false and true because it didn't meet the criteria. I have 2 falses here. This 302 doesn't meet any criteria, and so forth and so on. Okay. Lastly, we're going to sum our column that we created called successes, and we're going to call that a new column called success count. We're also going to sum our client errors, which was a new column that we created off of our condition, and we're going to create a new column called client error count. All right, let's run that. And you can realize over in our field browser, oops, I went somewhere too quick, sorry. All right, so here when we run it, we can see in our messages tab, in our field browser, we now have client error status and success is, okay. So we have client errors count and success count. I don't see my success count. Let me run this again. And notice you have an aggregates tab because again, we use the aggregate operator sum. So we're going to automatically get an aggregates tab. We see our success count and our client error counts. So we can form a little ratio here. We have 9 to a percentage ratio here that we can formulate if we wanted to. Okay. So that was a conditional operational example. All right. let's go back. Forward. All right. So also, if you look at your steps here under the optional test your knowledge, I'm just going to walk through this verbally. Okay. Your source category access is what you're looking at. You're parsing out your status code. But in this conditional statement, notice we're saying if status code matches, and look at the code here, it says 4 asterisk. So anything that begins with 400, 41,000, 4 million. Okay, so here, instead of using the equals, we're using the matches because we're going after a wildcard. We're doing the same thing in the next step as well. Okay. All right, and then we're summing those. So again, that's something you can do on your own there. But again, be aware we're using the matches as opposed to the equals. All right, let's go ahead on to lab number 5, using subqueries to filter. Now we're going to do this in multiple parts, so I want you to be aware of it. Some of you may be familiar with SQL. As I said yesterday, we have similar features as SQL. So if you think about subqueries in SQL, this is similar to the same thing. Same thing here. We're going to use an inner query results for our outer query to run. Okay. So essentially here, we're going to create a child query that's going to return an IP address. We're then going to use that IP address that's from our child query as a keyword for our parent query. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to do this in steps. So let's go ahead and grab number 1 here. Under number 1, let's just grab that, go back to our CIP and create a new log search. And paste and run. So you've done this several times. You're bringing back all of your access messages. That's nothing new. You guys are aware of that, okay? Going back to our lab guide, let's now go down to step number 2 and highlight that, okay? So let's copy step number 2 and let's go back to the CIP and add a new log search. So right now we're running these 2 queries individually. Let me break down what it's doing here for you. This would be considered the child query. Okay, we haven't put them together yet. So first we're going against our error logs and we're looking for the keyword file doesn't exist. Okay, so I'll run that. That's the first thing we're doing. We're looking for that in our child query. And we can see there's quite a few messages. There's over 19 messages. I only got 1 page, so there's 19 messages where coming from our errors where it reads file doesn't exist. Okay. The next thing we want to do is we want to filter out and find the IP address, the time, and the error. So that message says, it says parse and look for the to the left of client. So to the left of client is going to be the time. And then we want to also bring back the error and the IP. So we're bringing back all of these fields in that message. We're filtering out these 3 fields. And we're running that. We should now see in our field browser, we now have error and IP. Okay, I don't know why time didn't come up, but time was already there, right? So time, the error, and the IP. So if I go over here, I see the word error, and I see the actual IP address. Notice here, ladies and gentlemen, the IP's address are all the same. Okay. Next, we're going to count our IP addresses. So there's only 1, so it's just going to count them all up. Give us an aggregate tab as well. All right, so we can see that that message occurred 23 times from our errors logs. So this file doesn't exist occurred 23 times from that IP address. Okay. Now, You'll notice in the very last message we're using a top K. A top K would rank our items. But since we only have one IP address, we could have used the top function operator in this case. But again, we're exposing you to the top K. Be aware the top K is going to rank the items for you. Okay. So when we run this here, again, there's only one IP address, so it's rank number 1. All right. So we want to use this IP address from our error logs as a keyword in our child query. No, excuse me, in our parent query. So let's go back to our lab guide, and under number 4, let's highlight the entire query under number 4 and go back to the CIP, and you can either replace or add a new log query, whichever you want to do. And I want to break this down for you, of course, as well. So remember, our parent query was the labs Apache access. That was number 13. Remember, I was saying bring back everything. Okay. Then we added the operator subquery : and we're saying source category labs Apache error file doesn't exist. So it's now adding the subquery. Here's the parse statement that the subquery has, and here's the count. And what I want you to notice now is the top K. All of this is the same, but let me add this, move this line down, apologize. So all of these are the same essentially from our child. All of this is the same. All we added was the operator subquery : and compose. We're using the compose operator, and we're saying compose that IP field as a keyword. Okay, so basically this statement is going to add that IP to this expression, okay, by utilizing a subquery. Okay, so the only thing we're talking about here new here is the term subquery and compose. This is my parent, and this, of course, is my child. All right, and if we run that, and I, of course, probably fat fingered it by putting comments there. If we run that, it's using that one IP address, and imagine if you have multiple IP addresses, this would be more practical, okay, in that sense. So it's passing that IP address into looking for keywords for the access messages. So we're looking for any access message that has this IP address. Okay. All right. All right, let's continue on here. There's more information about subqueries, ladies and gentlemen. I'll just give you this here link just in case you want it for your reference later, if you're interested in subqueries. All right, getting back to our lab guide, we're going to click on plotting our clients on a map. Lab number 6 is where we are. Plotting our clients on a map. Now, I want to first kind of give you some help here, ladies and gentlemen. The geo lookup. I'm going to click on this link here in my lab guide. You don't necessarily have to do it, but I want you to be aware, okay? First of all, be aware that we have a relationship with Newstar, okay? Newstar provides us these fields, okay? We have to give Newstar an IP address, okay? So we're going to send Newstar an IP address. It's going to look it up in a table. We have a table that Newstar populates. It's going to go in there and look for that information for that IP address, the latitude and the longitude and the count. Okay. You can also bring out a query to have Newstar bring back other fields, additional fields if you want to as well. Okay. All right. Now I digress to kind of give you a high level of the geo lookup. All right, now we're going to run this for all Apache logs and parse out the IP address. Okay, let's highlight what's on the number 2, and let's go ahead and copy that and go back to the CIP. I'm going to close some of these tabs and add a new log search. Okay, and I didn't want to run that, but I did do it, so I apologize. Let me go ahead and go to my options, and let's have some lines there. Okay, so again, you're familiar with Apache Access. I'm not going to run that. You know what that is. Okay, next, we're parsing. Okay, we're parsing looking for an actual format. Once we find that format, we're going to go ahead and query out our client IP address. All right, so it's saying, hey, look for dash dash, and the object before dash dash is going to be considered IP. So that's what it's doing. It's bringing that out. Now, line number 3 here. And it's best when you're looking at lookup statements, ladies and gentlemen, it's best to read them from right to left. So we have already filtered out the client IP address from our access messages. We're going to provide that to the geo lookup. So it's going to look it up. That IP address is going to look it up in that table. And then it's going to give us the longitude and the latitude just by us providing the IP address. Okay, so I'll run that. Okay. All right, now it has now provided us with the latitude and the longitude based on the IP address we've given it. Next, you know already this, you're going to count, that's an aggregate. So it's going to, you're counting the latitude and longitude. It's going to give us that aggregate tab, and we can see the amount of messages from that latitude and longitude, that location. Okay. And then lastly, we're going to sort. And we're going to sort and then sort our counts. Now, as I mentioned earlier, ladies and gentlemen, numbers are great. They're awesome to look at. But I don't want to look at 7,295 messages with the values. I'd rather see this on a map. So we're on our aggregates tab, and we can go over to our display options. Notice this map icon is available because we have the actual longitude, latitude, and the IP address and the count. Okay, so again, once I click on that, I'm now displaying my results in a map format. So I can see where these actual messages came at around the world. Odell, that's great, but I want to see the numbers. I'm a numbers guy. I like to look at the numbers. What do? Well, this first icon right here, first icon will allow you to go back to the numbers. So be aware you can always change and toggle from there. Okay. All right, very good. There's some optional items out here. Again, you can try those at your leisure. We're going to go ahead and continue on to number 7 here, lab number 7, calculating changes and moving averages. Right now, there's 2 operators that we're going to utilize. We're going to use the difference operator. So I'm just going to click on this to kind of just demonstrate and give you a high level of what it does. Okay, the difference operator calculates the rate of change in a field between consecutive rows. Okay, to produce the results, a diff requires that a specified field contain a numeric data, and any non-numerical values are removed from the search. Okay, the diff doesn't sort data, but instead it operates in a row in orders. Okay, so again, we're going to use the diff operator just to find out change. We're going to calculate change. Okay, so going back to our lab, let's highlight under number 1, copy, create a new log search. and paste. Okay, now let's go ahead and break this down for a second. I know we haven't done this one in a while here. Some of you haven't done the actual time slice. So what we're going to do here, I'll just comment the last 3 lines here. First of all, we're bringing back all of our lab Apache access logs, and we want to render our results in buckets. We're using the time slice operator. We want to create 1-minute buckets. Okay, so when we run that, again, you won't see anything right away. As we get down, we'll start seeing things. Okay, the next object here is we're going to count by that time slice. Now I want to point this out again. Notice time slice is in a different shade. That indicates that it's an operator. But notice here on the count by, we're using underscore time slice. That's a placeholder option. So I want to count what's in the time slice. We don't use the, we add the underscore so we don't mistakenly use the operator again. Okay. And when we run that, we're going to see our counts. But notice they're not in any order here. Okay, I see 1045, then 47, then 46, and so forth. So next, we're using the sort operator. We're specifically typing in ASC because the sort by default is going to sort in descending order. So we're explicitly typing ASC for ascending order. So now we can read this a little bit more easier here. We can see at 1041, there's 154 messages, 1042, 578, and so forth. Okay. Now we want to see the difference on a minute by minute case. So we're using the diff operator. So we're saying diff the count. Okay. Notice again, we're using a placeholder as opposed to the actual operator. Okay. Be aware you can either, John made a great point, you can use either sort by or order by. Either one will work. Good question there, Rodrigo. All right, so now if you take a look at my messages, I see at 1042, I had 288 messages. So I am going to subtract 288 from 457, and I get a negative 169 is the difference between those minutes, okay? I subtract 457 from 474, and I get the difference, 474 to 443, and so forth. So that's how we're getting the difference operator, okay? And of course, sometimes visualizations are good. So maybe a line chart might be helpful in some instances as well, okay? The next part of our lab here is talking about the smooth operator. Okay, and I want to click on that to kind of give you a highlight of the smooth. It's going to calculate your rolling or moving averages of a field. It's going to measure the average of the value to smooth the random variation. Okay, the smooth operator reveals trends in the data set so you can include in a query. Okay. Yes, sir, you are, James, a smooth operator. All right, let's go ahead and highlight the code under number 2. Again, it's essentially the same, but we'll break it down for you. Let's go back to our CIP and add a new log search. And let's paste. All right, so again, just to be aware, you're going to the source category, you're using your access logs, and you're looking for keyword status codes 404s. You're going to render that in 1-minute time slices. Okay, and if I can do this correctly, thank you. We're going to render that in 1-minute time slices, and then we're going to count up those items. So I'll run those 3 for you. So if I look at my original messages tab, I can see I have These are 404s. So it's looking for the status code of 404, okay? And then I have an aggregates tab because I told it to count as error count by time slice. So now I see my error counts by time slice. Of course, we're going to sort that so we can visually see in an order fashion. So now I can go through here and see, here are my error counts in those 1 minute buckets, time slices, okay? Then we're going to use the smooth operator for our error counts as a rolling average. Okay. And here we can see our math here in the first minute. You get 4 times 1 is 4. So you're on the first row here. You add the 2 up and you divide it by 2. So 30 divided by 2, you get 15 and so forth. Add up 3 divided by 3. Add up 4 divided by 4, etc. Okay. This is another instance where the numbers are great, but a visualization might be helpful. And in this instance, we have multiple values here that we're displaying. This here line chart is okay, but since we have multiple values to display, one of the things you might want to do is you might want to go over to the gear symbol here and change the series so you can change the chart type from being a line to a column. So this would be an example if you had multiple values being displayed, you can change the display options. So now I can see my actual rolling, my error counts in those 1 minute buckets, and I can see my rolling averages. And the big takeaway from this demonstration is to allow you to be able to display multiple points by changing the series. So that's the big takeaway from this example. All right, good job, ladies and gentlemen. Let's keep it going. All right, so we just calculated change here. And we plotted it on a combo chart. Yep, we did that. All right, let's go on to finding the needle in a haystack, lab number 8. You guys are doing awesome. Good job. All right, so the log reduce. Some of you may have seen me demonstrate this yesterday in the fundamentals, or maybe you've seen it in a fundamentals course on your own, okay? The log reduce is going to identify patterns, okay? It's going to look for those algorithms, okay? And you use the log reduce button and operator quickly assess activity patterns for things like a range of devices or traffic on a website. So again, we're going to use that log reduce first to identify some patterns. All right, let's just grab what's under number 1 here and copy that. And we're going to, this here new search, we run the log reduce on the snort security to identify unusual activity, intrusions. So that's a good keyword for us to be mindful of. Let's create a new log search. And again, we want to identify intrusions. So I'm going to first turn off the log reduce and kind of point out the messages for you. So I'm running my snort logs, okay, and just kind of look at the messages for you. Just kind of get a feel for it. So I can see it gives you the date, gives me email address code or something there. It says classification, sensitive data, okay? The next one says classification, web attack, classification detection, and so forth and so on. I am seeing over 1,487 messages. I'm seeing 1 of 60. Now, you guys know that we could go over, we could always click on our log reduce right here, or we can turn off our actual comments. Either one of these will work. So what we want to do is the tool to actually group the patterns together. So we don't want to look at 1,487 messages that are all similar. Okay, so we'll click on the log reduce. So that log reduce is then going to go and find patterns and group them together and start to count those patterns for us. And let me bump up the time. Maybe I'll put 60 minutes. You'll notice that the log reduce is also going to generate a signatures tab. All righty, here we go. Okay, so if I go to my messages tab, and we talked about this, if we look at the message, again, we can see the items, okay? Now, if I go to my signatures tab, I can see that this item here, the classification attempted information leak, appeared over 3,000 times. If I see over to the right any asterisks, that's to indicate that that value would be different. So of course the TCP addresses are going to be, all the IP addresses are going to be different. Okay, so that's why you see the asterisks. I see this object over 1,500 times and so forth and so on. Okay, now let's take a look further here of what we're seeing. I could, you could, we could evaluate this message and we can promote it to a higher value, a higher precedence, saying, hey, if I click on this this promote, it's going to bump it up to 10. Now, it changes the relevancy to 10. Imagine that John, my cohort here, he had to come behind me and evaluate these messages. One of the things that I could do here is I could say, yeah, this is a high priority. So I promoted it to 10, okay? Now I'm gonna put it back to where it was. If I look at this message and I say, well, I don't think John has to really be concerned about this, I can demote it. So it changed the relevancy to 0, okay? So that's what these promote and demote icons allow you to do. It allows you to change the relevancy. And that's important in case you have others that need to kind of take a look at it, or you need to identify something that's of higher relevance than not, okay? You also have the ability to click on, again, I'm in the log reduce, you can click on the count. What that's going to do is focus on just those 3,000 messages. So you can see I'm looking at only those 3,000 messages. You can also see that my actual log reduce has now changed, cleaning that up a little bit so you can visually see. It's now letting you know, hey, it's looking at all of those messages, okay? Now, you'll also notice in these messages when you start looking at them, I can see there was an attempted leak at a certain period of time. I can also look at the host and find out what are the surrounding messages? What happened a minute before, or 5 minutes before, or 10 minutes after? So I have the ability to change the surrounding message to see maybe what led up to this, or did anything happen after this? So again, just going to the host, you can see the surrounding messages. You can also see them from your name as well as from the category, the minutes before or the minutes after, okay? All right. All right, let's continue on here. Thank you, James. I'm glad I got some approval. You're a smooth operator, James. All right, now let's go ahead and click on the Lab 9 activity from a different period, okay? Here, we're gonna use the log compare. Now, I didn't go through this example yesterday, but I kind of wanna show you the actual log compare definition so you'll be aware of it. You're comparing your log messages to a prior period in time. Okay, it allows you to easily compare log data from different time periods to detect and find those anomalies, okay, or those changes. For example, you could determine what was different right before a failure compared to the previous day or the previous week. Or you could easily check if a new release was introduced and an issue was by reviewing the difference in the logs before or after, okay? So again, I just wanted to give you a high level of the log compare. We're going to use our snort logs here as well. So I'm just going to add status code 404 and the log compare, okay? So let's go ahead and go back to our CIP. Let's highlight the log reduce statement and remove it. We're going to go against our snort logs again, ladies and gentlemen. And again, we want our 404s. So we're just going to use an AND operator and type status code equals 404. This is a better data set. That's why we're using the snort logs and not going against what's in the actual lab. It's a better data set here, okay? And let's see here. So we're going for the 60 minutes. All right, so again, we're gonna do this for 60 minutes. So let's make sure we do our time is set at 60 minutes, okay? Now, you can essentially just click on the log compare, or you can type in that expression. The log compare is automatically going to add the log compare and the time shift statement, okay? So what this is doing, let me put in my 60 minutes because I kind of messed this totally up. So if you look what I have, make sure you have what I have. I have source category labs snort, and I just clicked on the log compare and it populated the expression for me. It's going to default to the last 24 hours or 24 hours ago, okay? So we're using our snort logs and we're using the log compare. The time shift period is 24 hours ago. We're doing this for the last 60 minutes, okay? All right, so notice here, what you're seeing here is today's value, and the difference from 24 hours ago is that bottom value. So again, today's value, and then there's a difference of negative 6.9. Today's value and the difference of yesterday of plus 5.5, and so forth, okay? Remember, the signature tab is going to create it based off the log compare. This value is a default, then minus 24. You can change that if you wanted to. Another way of changing the time period is going to the log compare and clicking the drop down arrow. So you can use a custom time if you want. But again, by default, it's going to use the minus 24 hours ago, okay? Now, if we peruse through these messages, we'll see, and we continue on, we'll see that we'll eventually get to something new. So we'll start to see the value. This is a new item. It didn't exist yesterday, so it's new, okay? And if we continue to go down our pages, we'll eventually get to something called gone. So that means it's no longer there, okay? So those gone and new messages might be where we would say we did an upgrade and maybe the message, the environment hasn't been upgraded fully. We can find out those types of instances, okay? Now let's go back to our lab steps that I kind of messed up totally. To view only these, the messages that have a delta percentage, where the percentage is more than 25, we're going to add a where clause. So let's just highlight under number 3, just the last line of code. Copy that, go back to our CIP, and let's add a new line. I know some of you saying, well, you're not just bringing back only the 404s. No big deal. You can always add that up there. But again, I want you to understand what's going on here. So what the tool is doing is saying, hey, we're going to use an absolute operator. We're looking for the delta percentage, and we want it to be greater than 25. So it's going to go through here and look, okay, here's one greater than 25, greater than 20, and so forth. It's going to look for those. Okay, so let's go ahead and run that. And now we should see only the messages that met that criteria. Okay, and we see only the messages that met that criteria. We'll see the new because again, it doesn't meet the criteria, but it falls out. So we'll see all the actual percentages that are greater than 25. So that was the absolute and the delta percentage greater than 25. All right, next. We only want to view the new items. So under number 4, let's just highlight where is new. Okay, let's copy that. And we're going to go back to our CIP and replace the absolute, where absolute. And we're just going to put where is new. So we only want to see the new items. Maybe those are the areas where we've already installed the new release. So we'll run that. And these are the items that only have new as a difference. Alrighty, and there is our histogram, and of course we'll see our signature results. Okay, so these are the only items that had new in them. So maybe we need to go and add an installation. Maybe we missed the server or missed something. Okay. All right, very good. All right, hang in there, ladies and gentlemen. You guys are doing awesome. Okay, let's go ahead and click on lab number 2. Isaac, you can actually, what I would do is just search in my actual Sumo logic, and you can find the is new. Okay. Whoops, went to the wrong place there. Sorry about that. All right. Let's go underscore is new and see if we get something better like that. And that log compare, we can see examples of it, but I don't see it right away. I'll look for that a little further on. Just give me an opportunity to find that. All right, let's get back here to our lab steps. Lab number 10, let's identify out of the ordinary events. So we're going to look at some outliers. Okay, and again, I want to give you some key points here. We're going to look at some mean and standard deviations, and we're going to have a window area where it sets the trailing number of data points to calculate the mean and the sigma. We're going to have a threshold area where it sets the number of standard deviations for calculating. We're then going to have a consecutive area where it sets the required number of consecutive indicators, the outliers, in order to trigger a violation. And then we're going to have a direction area where we can see we want anything above or below the threshold. Okay. So again, this is your outlier. Again, I'll put this in the chat for you in case you want to review it a little bit more in depth. You can do that. All right, going back to our actual lab step, we're going to search our Apache access logs, looking for status codes of 404 for the last 60 minutes. We want to render them in 1-minute chunks. So we're going to use the time operator, the time slice operator, and to count up our 404s. We're then going to identify outliers outside of 3 standard deviations and then plot them on the line graph. Okay, so let's go ahead and highlight that entire code there and copy it. And let's go back and create a new log search. All righty, log search and paste. All right, so again, you guys are aware that we're going to go to our Apache access. We're going to look for our status codes of 404s. We're going to render our results in 1-minute time slice buckets, and then we're going to count those items. So I'm going to change this to the last 60 minutes and run this. Okay, so I am seeing my error counts in 1 minute buckets. They're not in any order, okay? Next, we're going to use the outlier operator, okay? And I mentioned to you, it's going to display the window, the consecutive, as well as the threshold. And I'm just going to bump my threshold down a little bit, put it a decimal point here, and see if I can get some numbers here. And let's run this for the last 60 minutes. All right, now what we're looking for, ladies and gentlemen, is something that falls out of boundaries. So in my environment, I look at line number 20, line number 10 here. I can see my error count is 26. The upper boundary is 8. The lower boundary is 12. So this 26 is outside of the upper and lower boundaries. So I have a error count indicator, okay? It also initiated an error count violation because I have the consecutive set to 1, okay? If I were to change this to 2, and let me run this again. I'm digressing for a moment to give you another example here. All right, now here's another example, okay? My line number 14. I have 13 error count messages. My upper is 22, but my lower is 13.6. So yes, that actually falls outside the boundary. So it issues an error indicator. But since I have my consecutive set to 2, it does not issue an error violation. It needs to be 2 consecutively, okay? So if I look at the next row, I have 23. My upper is 22.2 and my lower is 13.1. That again falls out of the boundary. So now it does signify an error count violation because I have it set to consecutive, okay? Numbers are great, analyzation is great, but this may be another indication where I want to display this in a line chart, okay? Here I see my upper and lower boundaries, and I see the actual outliers, okay? I can change the direction. If I want to see anything above the boundaries, I would use the plus symbol, and it's only going to display the outliers above the boundary, okay? I can use the minus symbol once this comes back, so I'm only seeing the above boundaries there. Use the minus symbol, and again, display the items below the boundary. All righty, very good there. As I mentioned, the window is going to give you the mean plus the standard deviation. The threshold is going to set the number of standard deviations for you. Okay, and then the consecutive is going to control your actual error, your actual message displays. Okay, and the direction will give you above or below the actual boundaries. All right. Awesome sauce. Let's go ahead on to the next item, which is identifying future trends in lab number 11. Identifying future trends in lab number 11. All right, I need to kind of demonstrate here to you the predict operator. I am just going to click on this link and open it in a new tab. You don't need to do this. Be aware, you can always go and click on it at your leisure. But I want to show you there's 2 types of predictions, okay? There's a linear regression model, which is what we're going to use. And there's the auto regression model. Okay, so again, this here link I'll paste in the chat for you. You can peruse that and review that on your own. Be aware there's 2 types of predictions. Okay. All right, going back to my lab steps. We're going to search our Apache logs for our status 404s for the last 60 minutes. We're going to render them in 1-minute buckets, counting up the 404s. And then we're going to use the predict operator to predict the future trend of our 404s. Okay, so let's highlight the code, copy it, go back to the CIP, new log search. Again, we're going to do this for 60 minutes so we can change our time. And I'm just going to turn off the actual predict and just get the values. Again, we're getting our access message status codes 404, rendering them in 1-minute buckets. We're going to count up the status code and create a new column called error count. Again, remember, whenever you use an aggregate, you're going to get the aggregates tab. So I have my original messages tab. Okay, and then now I have my aggregates. I can see my status code counts with 404s for my access messages. Okay, next we're going to use the predict operator because we want to predict and see how the 404s are going to be going in the future. So I can turn off the comments, run this again. And we're going to see a new column here called error count. And as we scroll through here or page through here, we're going to start seeing that we don't see any more error counts, or we don't see any error count errors anymore. So we don't see any more values in those fields. Again, numbers are always good to look at, but another way to present this results may be a line chart, okay? So we can see that, hey, we're getting 404s, but it's predicting that it's going to increase. Notice the line is going upward. It's going to be a slow incline. Okay, so that's what that prediction allows you to do, predict future items. All right, awesome sauce again. And let's go to our analyzing related logs in lab number 12. All right, so here we want to use the transaction operator, which allows you to analyze related sequences of messages based on a unique transaction identifier, such as a session ID, okay? All right, let's first highlight everything under number 3 there. We're going to run this search for our ecomark log messages for the last 24 hours. Okay, we're going to notice that each message contains details indicating the IP address and the state that it was triggered. For example, we're going to see order shipped. We're going to see the checkout information, our 2 possible states. Okay, so let's copy this. And again, we're going to create a new log search for 24 hours. And let's paste that in there. 24 hours. Again, we're going against our econ mark. We're parsing out the IP address. We're using the IP for our transaction operator, and it's going to identify different states. Okay, so let's run that. And what we're seeing here, if I go back to my messages tab, for example, ladies and gentlemen, just to kind of get an idea of what we're seeing, we see that there was some order ship statuses, there's some confirmations, and there's some others. So what this is going to do, again, it created an aggregates tab. It's going to allow us to see the state of our items. Now, using that transaction ID, transaction operator, allows us to use the actual flow diagram. So that's one of our display options. And here we can notice that there's some red here right away where we're seeing our inbound traffic, where we have 3 orders shipped and 2 confirmed. We have 5,000 items in our cart. In the outbound, we have over 5,200 items in our outbound cart. So imagine this, ladies and gentlemen. My wife and I are in the grocery store. We have a shopping cart. I'm pushing the cart. I grab something, put it in. I turn around, go get something. She takes what I put in out. I grab something again, put it in. She takes it out. So what you're getting is the status of your items. Again, okay. So again, I'm looking at the actual shipping information here. All right, and lastly, let's get into lab number 13. As in DevOps, you don't want to give someone alerts on any type of message, okay? So one of the things we have and we want to share with you is a blog post that discusses and talks about when or what makes a meaningful alert, okay? What items are actionable, where should alerts be directed, and so forth and so on. So I'm going to put this in the chat window for your convenience to read and kind of get an understanding about when should we apply those alerts, okay? Those are two key principles for creating meaningful alerts. All right, let's go back to our lab here. What we're going to do here in this last lab, ladies and gentlemen, rather than alerting on simple counts, we're going to learn to create an alert that will notify you when your 404s increase or have a higher rate than your overall traffic. So we're going to go ahead and highlight the entire item under number 5. We're counting our 200 messages as success and our 404 messages as failures. We're summing our successes and failures to get a count, and then we're going to create a ratio. So let's copy that. And let's create a new log search and paste. Okay. And again, we want to do it for 60 minutes. And I'll just comment out a few of these just because you're familiar with most of them. So again, we're going against our access log messages. We want to return our status codes of 200 and 400. We're going to render our items in 1-minute buckets. We're using a conditional statement. If the status code is 200, we want it to be 1 as true or 0 as false. And we're going to create a column called successes. We had another conditional statement where we're looking for our 404s, and we're doing something similar. 1s are true, 0s are false, and we're going to call that fails. We're then going to sum our successes and call it success count. We're going to sum our fails and call it fail count. We're summing those all by time slice. So we run that for the last 60 minutes. And we can see our success and fail counts here, okay? The next thing we're going to do here is we're going to create a failure rate percentage column where we're taking the fail count, dividing it by the multiplication of success count and fail count, and then multiplying that by 100, okay? That's going to give us our rate percentage. And then finally, we're going to create an outlier on our fail rate percentage. So here's our failed rate percentage based on this math statement. As I mentioned, lastly, we will create an outlier where we're creating an outlier based on our failed rate percentage. So we're going to look at that failed rate percentage column. All right. Again, we see our fail rate percentage there. And then lastly, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to add a where clause. We're adding this line so we can filter out only outliers when the ratio is higher than normal. So we're going to create a where clause and add that to the last statement. and add a new line here and paste. We want our failure rate percent violation, this column right here, to be greater than 0. Okay. And that greater than 0 is going to produce when we should send an actual alert. So these are the indications of when we're going to send an alert. Odell, how do we send an alert? Very good question. So remember, in the fundamentals course, we talked about this. In order to create an alert, we go to the query area. We either click on the save as icon or the 3 dots, whichever is easiest. Click on save as. We can, of course, give it a name, but we want to go down to the schedule this search. Again, we need to change it from a frequency of never, and I'm just going to do it for 15 minutes. Again, you want to make sure you have a time range. And as I mentioned yesterday, when you're creating alerts, you have the ability to email. But what if you want to do a Slack alert? Well, you can create some webhooks. Or maybe you want to use a ServiceNow connection. So you have other alerting mechanisms here. Okay, I'm just going to use email. And of course, you can turn on your results and provide an actual email address. Okay, and then you can, of course, save it. Odell, how do you turn off that message? It keeps running. It wakes me up at night. Well, you can go to where that message is saved. So if I open up my navigation panel and go to my actual personal, I can actually go to the 3 dots, click on edit, go back to edit this, and then turn it off. So change it from 15 minutes to never. So by putting it to never and updating it, it will no longer run. All right, very good. So let's get back here. And are there any questions? I know I went over a bit there, John. I apologize there. All right, if there aren't any questions, then of course, you have the ability to get certified. There's 30 questions, 60 minutes. You need 75% to pass. Again, open slides, labs, and documentation. I am going to digress to kind of demonstrate to you what you need to do. So if you can watch me for a second here. One of the first things you want to do here, ladies and gentlemen, because you're in our training environment, you don't want to take the certification exam in our training environment, because the certification will read, congratulations, training analyst number 313. You successfully passed the search mastery test. So the first thing you want to do is log out of our training environment. That's the first thing you want to do. Then you want to log into your Sumo Logic environment at your company. Log into that environment. Once you log into that environment, I first want to point out to you where you can get the labs and the actual slides. Let me do that first, okay? So if I go to the certification under my home tab, go to certification. Notice I'm logged in as Odell Gordon here, okay? I click on get certified. We want you to pass the exam, ladies and gentlemen. We want you to pass it. So I'm demonstrating where you can find the actual lab guide and the slides. So once you click on that, get certified, you come into recorded live training. We just completed the search mastery. That's what you're going to click on, search mastery. Okay, you would register, and here is where you could get the lab guide and the actual slides. Okay, now, as far as taking the exam, Again, you're in your company's Sumo Logic environment. You're clicking on certification. You're clicking on get certified. Once you click on the get certified, you'll then click on get certified again. You'll click on the get certified again. You can filter based on language if you need to. We have just completed the search mastery. So you click on the search mastery. Of course, you would register real quickly and take the exam. Okay, I want to remind you that once you complete the exam and you click on next, it will give you a list of the items you got wrong. Okay, it doesn't give you the answer. You won't see the answer, but at least you have an idea you got that one wrong. The key thing, you want to submit after you analyze, and then you can retake it if you want to. Okay, any questions? All right, I'm going to stop sharing. And on behalf of John Meredith and myself and all of the trainers here at Sumo Logic, we thank you for allowing us to present to you. Good luck on the actual exam. I will post the Uber Eats voucher in the actual chat. You have an hour to take the exam.